fired up for that Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
Getting centered.
Good evening. Join me and stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Welcome to the final 2025 Finance Committee meeting. This is very informal. It's mostly just because the 9 of us cannot meet without it being an open meeting. And I wanted to make sure we touch base one more time to make sure we're on the same page in regards to the information that we received at the finance meetings at the end of September. I'll open it for comment in just a moment, but I was going to read just what I have so that we can kind of determine where we are in regards to the budget and where it is now. So this is what we know. The 2025 budget initially as presented was about $1.7 million over the expected revenues. The total was calculated using the DLGF forms and confirmed by the DLGF interim field rep. When calculating the general fund beginning operating balance for January 1st, 2025, using the adopted 2024 appropriation totals, I calculated the city would start with a deficit of almost $250,000 for the general fund, and that was also confirmed by the DLGF rep as well. The deficit might be a little bigger because the 10% pay raise that was given to the civilian employees starting in May would not be in those adopted totals. However, a lot of those employees are in street or in parks, and so that isn't going to play in as much, but there will be a little bit of play there. But it's safe to say that as far as the general fund, there's very little wiggle room in regards to where our budget is. The general fund covers the 15 departments, everyone but Parks, Beach Grove, Street Department, and Prairie Creek Reservoir. So the other 15 departments split that general fund money. The meetings in September allowed the committee to meet with the department heads to discuss changes in their budgets between 24 and 25. And during that time, we discovered that Mayor Ridenhour alerted the council to 2 errors in the proposed budget. The first was the Board of Works health insurance was over budgeted by $1.2 million, $1,213,406 to be exact. And there was an underreporting of revenue in the interest item R902 by $520,000. Those 2 totals will bring that 2025 revenue and expenses more in line, closer together. And so that is a relief for all of us that thought we needed to somehow reconcile $1.7 million. However, at the October meeting, the Muncie Police Department voluntarily forfeited $223,000 back to the general fund, which will also help close that deficit in the general fund for the beginning of operating balance on January 1st, 2025. But I need to remind the committee and the council members that we have 3 unions that are in active negotiations with their contracts with no input from either negotiating parties as to the estimated cost of those agreements or where that money will come from. For example, if the city were to offer both police and fire only a 3% raise based on the 2024 budget totals, that would cost the city over $383,000. And so that's where we have to talk about that very little wiggle room from the general fund. And that's not, I don't know that that's what they're offering. I was just giving an example of how close this will be and how we need to make sure that there is money in that general fund to cover our employees' increases. And that's what's motivating me and what should motivate council. So from there, we talked about I think we all can agree that the Board of Works, that $1,213,406 that was over budgeted can be reduced. I think that's something we can all agree on. Chief Burford from the fire department reported during his meeting that their perf line item could be reduced by $240,000, $512,000. 240. Sorry, that wasn't right. 240. Thank you.
Did you say repeat that?
Yes, it's $240,512.
But that still brings us to a beginning operating balance of approximately only $230,000 for the general fund. And that's what we're here to discuss. One other option in regards to the Board of Works reduction, the addition of the interest and Chief Burford's voluntary reduction would be to reduce all raises in the budget to the 1% that the controller mentioned during those budget meetings. And so I started going through the budget to try and calculate what that would look like, reducing the salary line items to 1%. It became confusing, and I emailed the controller's office today. The Muncie Police Department was spot on in their 1%. The fire department was just very slightly over, but when trying to reduce the civilian employees to 1% over the 2024, it got difficult. Obviously, the 10% raise given in May will not be in that 2024 adopted budget, but that should mean that we're able to look at the 2025 budget and look at 2024 plus 11%, and that would give us what we have, but that's not the case. There were some, like I said, had 1%, but the administrative assistant had a 3% raise. A lot of the department heads had a 6% raise. The controller and deputy controller, the communications director all had 8% raises. And so I couldn't really determine what would be the best way to address the civilian employees. And so that might be something that we need to get input from the controller's office, or just go with the numbers that we have. So that's where I want input from the committee. But at this point, I will again reemphasize that we are looking at a beginning operating balance of approximately $230,000 for the general fund. And those are estimates, because any money not spent in the general fund will revert back to the general fund. But right now we can say that we have a beginning operating balance of about $230,000 after the chief's voluntary reduction. And so I'm opening it up to the other members to see if there's any reductions that you've looked through and saw that might help us balance out that general fund and shore up some money so that we do have money to support any contracts that come through.
Councilwoman,
Yes, please.
may I ask you a favor, please? And that's not to contradict what you're saying.
No, go right ahead.
May I hear from the
Absolutely.
controller? Is there, if Mr. Craig, Mr. Wright, thank you. Thank you. You heard Councilwoman's presentation or discussion. Is there any, do you agree with what she said, or is there anything that you can add or help
Well,
us with our decisions, please?
Last year in 24, we did appropriate for the 5% raise. So that was into 24. So. And as far as the negotiations, we don't know where we're at on the negotiations, and, you know, we're just beginning those. So we feel like, as far as the budget's concerned, with what we put into the Board of Works, what we did as far as on the interest earned on that and the additional funds, that we have plenty to fund the budget. So
Thank you. Thank you.
And it did bring the
Yeah.
additional interest, and the reduction in the Board of Works health insurance did bring the budget as presented closer in line as far as that general fund.
Mhm.
And again, I'm talking about I'm referring to just the general fund today. If we want to discuss the other funds, the parks, Prairie Creek, well, not Prairie Creek, parks, Beach Grove, or the street department, we can do that. But the
Yeah.
totals I'm giving today are just
Mhm.
talking
That's
about
right.
general fund.
Yeah.
That's where we keep it simple.
Exactly. Clarification, you budgeted a 5% raise in 2024.
24.
And so just to clarify, the 10% raise that then actually came for police and fire, that
was for them. We did budget it for them last
Okay.
year.
So civilian
And then
employees
for-
got a
yes.
5% raise?
Yes. And then we added the additional.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Is there some place that we can have a list of what those salaries are now with the 10% raise that was given in May? for instance, I thought I could go to the budget performance sheet and look and see like on the adopted budget or even the amended budget and find the new totals, and I'm not finding that anywhere. I'm not finding anywhere that reflects the civilian employees.
Well, that would be
salary.
in a salary ordinance, which we're in the middle of putting together a salary ordinance now to be turned into the clerk's office on Monday.
But that's the salary ordinance for next year. I'm
Right.
talking about this year. Since May, there's no documentation showing that, for instance, I don't know, I should have brought my glasses too. So, that the animal shelter, dog tech is getting the 2024 salary adopted totals plus 10%. I'm not finding any documentation. Obviously, it wouldn't be in the adopted 2024 budget,
Right. It would,
But- but it should be in the amended budget for the budget performance reports, shouldn't it?
that would be if we had done the additional appropriations. The proposed salary ordinance that is tabled would be okay, 2024
Right.
adopted budget is the 2023 plus 5%.
Mhm.
The proposed salary ordinance that's tabled is the 2024 plus 5%. So it's 10% over the 2023.
2 years. Okay.
So the 10% that you gave the civilian employees in May is really only 5%.
It's
That
5 plus 5.
No, we were paying them.
I'm sorry.
No,
I
no, you're
did get
fine.
permission.
You're
No.
fine.
No,
This is
we,
more informal. Go ahead.
Okay.
before that, we were paying them the 2023 rate until we gave the raise.
Okay. But is there,
But we anticipate, I'm sorry to interrupt,
go
but
ahead.
but we anticipated giving at least a 5% raise when we were budgeting for 2024. And we wanted to put that in the budget for 2024. So we didn't, the salary ordinance had not changed.
But you've been paying that
Since
10%
May.
raise, but
It's not
but it's not
documented
any,
anywhere.
but we can't see what that is. We don't know what those numbers are.
The numbers are in the proposed salary ordinance.
So the members of the finance committee should be able to look at the table ordinance, and that will give us what we need in regards to adding the 1% to those totals to
Yeah.
get to the point. Okay,
Yes, yes,
that,
yes.
that,
Remind us, what was, I'm sorry.
no, go.
And all the
Please.
department heads
Yeah.
factored in
Mhm.
the correct salaries on that with the 1%.
Remind us, what month was that introduced? It's been tabled, what, for 5 months?
If, I can't remember
I
exactly.
think we're
but
going on this.
I know, but I know it's referred to in all of the agendas.
Yeah, yeah,
For
okay.
all of the council
And I-
meetings. It was tabled from.
Well, I've
hope
just got a
it's
hard copy somewhere that I just like to
July,
go
June
to.
or July.
I believe it was June or July because the raises started in May
Yep,
and then it came.
you're right,
a
it
month
was.
Yes,
so
I
after.
think, I think I
It would have been
remember.
introduced in June
Yeah.
and then would have been adopted in July had we not tabled.
Yep.
So that actually will give a good piece of information and send us on the right way as far as being able to look at those totals and add the 1% over that total. Again, I'm open to discussion on other opportunities for reductions.
And
Thank you.
1224.
if I may,
Yes, please.
and regardless of what's budgeted, nothing in excess of the salary ordinance will be
Correct.
paid.
Correct.
So if there was an error in the budget, it doesn't mean that that person gets more money, because it was back and forth, and then, we were hoping to give higher raises, and then the whole insurance thing popped up. And then we had to change it to, to reflect what we anticipate our revenues to be minus the 350,000 additional in Humana for retirees
Mhm.
per year, plus the 13.9% increase in the health insurance. But nothing in excess of what the salary ordinance will be
Right.
paid.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of moving pieces when you're creating the budget and you know, and you calculate it on the calculator and you enter it in the computer and sometimes, you know, you miss a line or you get a phone call or anyway, sorry.
No, you're fine.
And may I just add
Yeah.
an exclamation mark for what councilperson Nora discussed, our chair discussed, finding new revenues and errors that allow us to sleep at night.
Right, right.
Thank you
absolutely,
for that.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to say, while I'm just talking, thank you to the chair for conducting these meetings in such a professional way that allows us to have a back and forth without angst.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, and this is just my thought, because for 10 years I was chief deputy treasurer for Delaware County. And when I look at the numbers that the DLGF put out for the tax caps,
Mhm.
the tax caps are more than the increase in our property tax levy.
Sure.
That makes
Yeah.
no sense.
Yeah, true.
By $300,000 or $400,000. So I personally, because of course the tax cap is only an estimate. We won't know until we actually do the settlement.
Mhm.
I think their estimate's wrong. I think their estimate is off. I can't understand.
It follows the trend though of the last 4 years. We are, and when I was on council before, and talking to our previous field rep, Ryan Burke, he said that there were only a few communities in Indiana that unfortunately it should have, when that was installed, we should have seen a rise, an even out, and then maybe even a decrease. But for some reason, Delaware County was one of those that just kept going up. We had that luxury along with Lake County and
Uh-huh.
obviously Marion County, but we were one of those communities that just, for whatever reason, we kept seeing a larger and larger circuit breaker loss. So while I hope that it is way
Right.
overestimated, by pulling the
Right, we
last
have,
things,
I mean, we have to
we
go by
have
their
seen-
estimate,
Yeah.
right,
well, we've
absolutely.
seen when they've reconciled that in April, we've seen those circuit breaker losses increasing every year.
Right, but not, I mean, the circuit breaker losses, yes, but not in excess of what your levy goes up.
Usually
Your levy goes up $1.5 million and your circuit breaker goes up $2.
I know.
I mean,
we're
is
almost
there
losing
property that's
half
being
of our property,
transferred
yeah.
from industrial, which is 3%, to residential, which is 1%? This one doesn't make sense. I've looked at the trend and you're right. It does, the circuit breaker goes up, but this year is
It's
different.
excessive.
Mhm.
I have a question about the utilities, because when we're looking at the performance the budget performance reports, some of these departments who have budgeted, and I don't know that they're budgeting, it's just how it falls, and that's
Mhm.
kind of what we discussed before. They may have a great deal budgeted, but they've only expended 4%, 12% at this point in the year, and so is that an area where we can reduce some of that, or where we can count on or budget less in the next year?
Hey,
How is
the-
that, number
the-
one, determined, and how is that split up amongst departments?
Generally, your utilities are like, especially like for City Hall, is by square footage.
Okay.
I assume. I mean, it's the system we inherited.
Yeah.
And when there are departments that may have more in their budget than they've used, like say they're 75% through the year and they've only used 50%. I mean, eventually there's going to be a department that's coming up short and our utilities clerk will pull the money from the budget that has additional funds.
Yeah.
But the next budget we prepare will have all the utilities in City Hall. Well,
Board of Works.
and
Yes.
well, actually, all of the utilities that are in the general fund will be in Board of Works, so that
That makes so
it's
much
easier to
Yeah.
track, it's easier to budget. It's,
Okay, that's
And we're
what I was
going to
gonna say.
also do that with the health insurance
Okay.
next.
And that's, we had
Well,
tried.
Well,
to
that
do
makes
that way.
sense, doesn't it?
Okay,
I mean, that keeps it.
And I want to
departments have no
recognize,
control.
I'm sorry.
oh, no, you're
I'm
fine,
sorry.
councilperson
thank you.
Selby. No, you're fine.
Councilor.
No.
So that's what exactly I was thinking, but do we need, I think all the utilities, is that what you just said, needs to come from the controller's budget instead of
Well, no,
the,
we're gonna put it into Board of Works.
but why not for the controllers? Why can't
Because
we create
every-
let me finish.
Oh, sorry.
Why can't we create, I don't understand why, just like you said, I totally agree. But why can't we create, or one of us create an ordinance where all the utilities come from one check and come from the controller's office? And can he answer that for me, please?
Absolutely.
I can,
Go ahead.
Okay,
because everything in the general fund is under Board of Works.
okay,
Like your
Thank
fund
you.
numbers, the 19,
okay.
that's Board of Works
Okay, so when are you planning to make that happen?
for the next budget.
Yes.
Thank you.
So
I
we will be
understand now.
working
Thank
on
you
it
for
next summer.
clarifying. Okay, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, we're gonna, because we have to go through all the departments and add up all the utilities and just make sure that that's gonna be sufficient to cover it. And then we'll put it in for the gas, water, electric. I mean, the other funds that are independent of us, like parks
Mhm.
Right.
and whatnot, they'll continue to have their own
Okay,
budget for that. But
sense.
everything else will be under Board of Works because it's all general fund.
And I
That's awesome.
appreciate that
Thank you.
because we had tried to move that direction in previously and it didn't quite go, but it makes so much more
Mm.
sense just because it puts less stress on the different departments to try and
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
you know what, when you sit and look at it, it makes a lot more sense.
Mhm.
okay.
They have no control over the utilities or the insurance, so there's
Yeah.
no reason to have it
Yeah.
in their
Why
budget.
does human rights have a budget for the,
Right.
or community development have a budget for the heating, et cetera, when it all comes out of that?
Thank you.
And I appreciate that input, but I want to bring this back around to the fact that we, at this point,
Mhm.
will have a beginning operating balance of approximately $250,000. And as Mr. Wright has said, we have no idea what these three unions are going to decide upon and how much that will cost. And if that's coming from the general fund, then we could hit a wall. And so I'm going to ask if there's anyone that has any other ideas on reductions. Little things like I noticed that other insurance but these the budget itself is so slim at this point. It's so tight that reducing the
Mhm.
other insurance and public works and the Board of Works by $7,000. Yes, it's something, but it's not going to get us
No.
to where we need to
Yeah.
be. And so I'm going to again, open that up to anyone else and see if they have any ideas for reductions. One thing I don't want to do is obviously, we don't want to get to the point where we're cutting for services and things along those lines. But we do need to look into, and I will try and get with you about just to make sure that the numbers that we're calculating for that 1%, to make sure that that we're shaving off any additional increases in salary and just make sure that those numbers are better, because using the ones we had for our budget, and I don't think I have it, there was money that could have been saved there, but if it's already being paid, then we absolutely don't want to do
Mhm.
that.
And
So
going in, I mean, of course, we can't discuss anything as far as the negotiations, but going into the negotiations, we are cognizant of the fact that this budget is razor thin,
well, and you can understand then why that causes us
right?
hesitation.
Mhm.
Right?
Because that money, any increases that you negotiate with AFSCME will have to come from the general fund or the streets and parks.
Yeah.
But we do have AFSCME members that are paid out of the general fund, and so that will have to come from that. Police and fire police and fire make up 75% of our general fund, and so our firefighters and our patrolling officers are paid. The bulk is paid out of the general fund, and so any of those things
Mhm.
could be a real huge hit, and so that's why we're meeting here tonight. So, but
I'd like to ask a question if I may. Is there any opportunity for an increase in revenue? Any other sources? I know we're talking about annexation here.
Well, that won't, the annexation won't take effect for
2 years.
till
27.
27.
27.
Is there anything out there at all?
No.
Does the budget fluctuate as far as income due to those paying property taxes or not?
Absolutely.
It does, because of course, if they don't pay their property taxes, we don't get paid. And I haven't looked at the size of the tax sale. What, this month? It's generally somewhere in the neighborhood of the first part of October, but, so I don't know what the size of that is. And generally, if you take the gross taxes and multiply it by 40%, that's the amount that the city receives. But I haven't paid attention to because sometimes they're rather large. I mean, when I was there, we'd certify 1,000 properties. Now, some of them were empty lots or whatever, but it's quite a bit of money. And then anything that was paid prior to the tax sale or at the tax sale is paid to the city in the fall settlement.
A lot of folks I've noticed in years past will skip spring and they'll catch up in the fall.
Right, and then the whole
So-
year would be paid in the fall.
Yes.
Paid to
So-
us in the fall.
We've seen a trend like that before. So would that be then considered another source that we're going to get that we haven't had? So it could be possibility of a windfall. I don't know. It would be nice, everybody just step up and pay their taxes, but
Right,
I don't know if that'll happen.
I had a question. I can't think of it. What it was. Without getting into specifics or anything that's actually being discussed, do you have a target figure in mind in regards to negotiations?
As far as
Just like we can't discuss what we're negotiating, but we think we're gonna, and I understand that might be premature, but again, we are concerned here and that's why we're asking.
we're
the
shooting
question.
not to exceed what we budgeted. Yeah, I can say that.
And would you like to remind us what you budgeted?
Is 1%.
Okay.
That's, yeah,
And that's an increase in salaries, but in that, well, then we potentially never mind. I'm not even asking. We're going down a road that I can't.
Right.
All right. Well, then I guess unless there are other questions, we should all take a look at the tabled ordinance to get an idea of what the salaries being paid 2024 are. Ordinance 1224.
Yes.
Make sure that those 1% are accurate because we need to shave off whatever we can to make sure we can afford the contracts that are going through. So, are there any other questions from members of the committee? Okay, I want to thank you both for coming and answering these questions because that was very helpful. I want to thank the chief for coming and I want to thank the fire department for being so willing to move some of those expenses into your other revenue streams and to cut where you could to free up money in the general fund. I appreciate that very much. So,
and any
Yes.
questions that anybody has, please get with us because we would rather have the answers. We'd rather have the answers at the time of the meeting rather than to have to stand here and say, well, we don't know, we'll have to look into that
Yeah.
when we're, so.
well, and I would again remind the members of the committee to, if you do email, to email all of us the questions, so we're all getting the same information.
Yep.
We do have a fairly good idea of what those reductions that we at least have now in regards to the Board of Works, in regards to the money from the fire department. We'll look into that 1%. I also want to remind you as council persons that each one of us are one of 9. You have every right to suggest any reductions yourself. This is not Nora's show. I want each of you to understand that you have every right to make an amendment. Very important. So, having said that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right. I didn't call roll call.
Oh, okay.
I just.